Howdy, my name is Chris Rodidis, and in the second episode of Musicngear Taste Labs, we will be taking a look at a brand new device by Donner called Starrypad. It's this little gizmo here. It's a drum pad. It is quite sturdy and light enough to carry wherever you want to go. It has 16 pads, 2 rotary knobs, 2 faders, and plentiful buttons to play around with. It's worth noting that every button here and faders and these buttons here are customizable and mappable to whatever you want to, whatever MIDI node you want to, through the editor, which is available to download at Donner website. The build is quite sturdy, and as I said, it is light enough to carry with you and not feel the weight, but it also feels heavy enough to give it a feeling of quality gear. So the pads have an excellent sense of touch and resistance. We'll see how they perform later. The rotary knobs are quite good. You have very nice resistance when rotating them. The faders are pretty good. Could be a little bit tougher, but harder to move, I mean. But for a device and the size of the buttons, they're perfect to work with. You don't need to strain your finger too much because you will be doing other stuff here mainly while you're doing work with these buttons. And the other buttons are plain buttons, smaller. The size of these buttons is perfect for not missing a note and playing with one hand, while with the other hand you may work with these. The size of the device is ideal to fit in a bag. However, you might want to not cram it with other stuff because the rotary knobs might feel the strain. And overall, it's a very sturdy construction. It doesn't feel cheap. It feels quite expensive quality. And the material is quite quality too, as well as the pads, the material of the pads. So overall, the build is pretty good. Now, with regards to connectivity, the Starrypad connects with a provided USB Type-C cable, which is good news. Also, you have an adapter for a big USB plug to a USB Type-C plug, so that you can connect your Starrypad to a phone that supports USB on the go, of course. And also, Starrypad has a Kensington lock, and quite importantly, MIDI out. You get a cable for that too. It's a jack cable and a regular MIDI out 5-pin cable, and you can connect it to a MIDI in for another synth or whatever device accepts MIDI signals. Of course, you can do that through your DAW and the USB port, but that makes it compatible with older synths. learning to use a Starrypad with every device, that's something that needs to be considered. The manual, of course, is very well written. It's short, about 4 pages, where all the buttons are explained clearly, and the buttons are titled adequately and are pretty self-explanatory. You don't have to guess. I mean, there's a button here saying full level. It goes without saying. When you press it, the velocity goes at full level. And you have note repeat, a record button, play and pause, a knob bank, a fader bank switch, a pad bank, and in the manual it says that these 3 switches switch between 3 different configurations of knobs, these faders, this here, and the pads. So you have 3 different configurations of knobs, faders, and pads to play with. The full level, as we said, is playing with full velocity, whatever the pressure you're putting on the pads. And A/B buttons are customizable to whatever you choose in your DAW. The shift button is about accessing some other functionality in the pad, such as the time of the repeat pad, and transpose and octave functionality, and swing of the note repeat. And with the shift and this button here, you can also tap the tempo. All this about the repeat functionality. Something worth noting is that the editor app, which allows you to change the MIDI notes of each button here, the editor app is not mentioned in the manual, and it's a little bit counterintuitive. You have to search at the Google, I guess. Yeah, that's where I found it. It's on the Donair website, but it's a little bit buried. You can find it at the piano, I think, MIDI piano section of the download. Again, I'll give you a full link in the description of the video. So let's see how playable this little gizmo is. Fun time begins. So I have connected the Starrypad to Ableton Live. It's a straightforward process, and I have mapped the rotary knob to reverb, the amount of reverb, and the fader to the EQ high frequency cutoff, and loaded a pretty standard 707 drum bank from Ableton library, and let's hear it. You can play it with 2 fingers, or you can play it with 1 hand. I have adjusted the velocity curve to, you have 3 options for velocity, and I have set it to the 3rd option through the editor. It's quite easy to connect to the editor. Once you close, you shut down Ableton, and you hit save, and it's stored. So we have the 3rd velocity option, which makes it more sensitive to touch, because the first option was kind of hard on the fingers. Was done not detecting some hits. You can always play with a full level button here. So no matter how hard you press it, the velocity is at the maximum. I prefer to play with velocity, however. Let's hear it. Of course, it gets easier if you use two hands, because it's quite hard in the untrained hand to keep a steady beat for long. Let's take a look at note repeat. So by default it's set to 1/4. You can use shift, change to 1/8. However, as you can see, the note repeat functionality repeats pads, it would make sense, or it would be, I guess, more creative. And if it would repeat on the first pad pressed, then you were free to play with the other pads. But I guess that is something that could be fixed or changed in a future update. The bank change button is very useful, and you get great visual feedback as to which bank you have active, and the same with the fader and the pad banks. I'm not using many 33 banks, just one right now. Full level button is very useful because it hits the note without applying with minimal pressure. So if you don't care about velocity and you've grown pretty tired of pressing the pads, the full level works pretty great. I have to say the editor app is very thorough. Every pad maps to MIDI CC. The faders have very nice tactile feedback. They don't feel cheap or weak. And of course the size of the pad is ideal so that it is playable with one hand. All 16 buttons of the pad are reachable with within the reach of one hand's fingers, so you can play all 16 pads with one hand if you want to, and with the other hand you can play with the knobs and faders and the extra buttons. I guess the hardness and the velocity makes sense if you are playing with one hand, because you are not softly pressing the buttons. You are sort of like hammering, so you need that extra hardness in the velocity. Of course the velocity is adjustable. All in all, it's pretty fun, and I imagine myself using it to write the beats to my own music pretty often. So, conclusions. Overall, it's a great little gizmo. If you ignore the fact that you have to press a little harder, which I hope can be fixed in a future update, then you have a very nice device that is very playable and enjoyable. You have lots of configuration options that allow you great control and creativity. Hope you enjoy Starrypad. You can get yours at the links below. Till next time.